So, those of you who have perused my channel or got down the rabbit hole of looking at my playlists will realize that I have a playlist called something to the effect of book recommendations. And in there, I've highlighted certain books that I have felt in my own journey have been helpful to me in understanding the spiritual path generally and Buddhism in particular. But I thought I would do kind of a conglomeration of sort of references to different books in this particular musing video and just pick some out that I thought these 9 volumes would potentially be of interest for people who do have an interest in Buddhism and exploring it in more depth. First, I'll mention a couple of books that I got exposed to early on. And while there may be better books of their type, these sort of include a lot of content from a variety of different scriptures, Buddhist sutras or scriptures. And one of them is this called The Buddhist Tradition in India, China, and Japan, edited by William Theodore DeBerry. And I've learned now that if I put a book up like this in front of my face, it should come clear in terms of the video. And so if you can see that, it's a little paperback actually. And I'll just say a word or two about it, which is that the beauty of it really is that it has a lot of actual quotes from Buddhist scriptures. And so it's one that I would recommend as kind of a primer. It also sort of takes you through the early life of Shakyamuni Buddha and gives a good sampling of scriptures. Another one that gives a more substantial sampling of scriptures that was instrumental in my early exposure to Buddhism was actually called a Buddhist Bible, which was edited by Dwight Goddard. And this volume contains actually more extended excerpts from a variety of sutras, and that is its great benefit, as well as the fact that Goddard was a devotee of Buddhism, and he did actually a lot of the translations, and they're done in a maybe a less literal, more informal, more sort of devotionally oriented kind of language at times that may be not as modern and maybe even a little bit of a turnoff. But the point is, in this one volume, and I'll just swing to the contents, where there are selections from Pali sources. The selection from Sanskrit sources include a version of the Heart Sutra, the Diamond Sutra, some portion of the Sarangama Sutra, some actual excerpt from the Lankavatara Sutra, and also the Awakening of Faith Shastra. So in those in themselves, you get in one volume extended excerpts from some of the key Mahayana sutras. And of course, on that basis, as certain ones of them may especially be of interest to you or excite you in terms of their content, then you can dive deeper into more modern translations. I'll mention one other book that kind of does a survey of various Buddhist teachings. Is called The Heart of Buddhist Teaching by Thich Nhat Hanh. And of course, Thich Nhat Hanh has written a lot of books about Buddhism. And he writes this one, of course, in his own inimitable style. But in it, he does cover basically all the various concepts, within Buddhism, at least with a broad stroke brush. He covers the first Dharma talk, the Four Noble Truths, the Noble Eightfold Path, the doctrine of two truths, 3 Dharma seals, 3 doors of liberation, 3 bodies of Buddha, the 3 jewels, 5 aggregates, 5 powers, 6 paramitas. And so he goes on, the links of interdependent co-arising. He really covers the waterfront. And to be honest, if I was to do an introductory class on Buddhism, or had a group that wanted to establish kind of a seminar-oriented get-together to focus on Buddhism, this might be the volume that I would choose that would have the greatest value. And of course, he always talks from a standpoint of great, not only erudition, but great devotion to the Dharma. Now, if we want to get into a little more depth on particular traditions within Buddhism, if a person wanted to really dive into what was actually the nature of the early teaching of the Buddha, and what was the content, so to speak, of the Pali Canon, or that earlier teaching. In other words, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, and the 12 Links. Well, this is a great book, What the Buddha Taught by Walpola Raula. And you can see it's pretty small. It's only paperback that's just a little over 100 pages, maybe 130 or 40 pages, and yet is extremely scholarly and extremely accurate in terms of how it describes this tradition. Now, if you get into this earlier Theravada form of Buddhism or Nikaya form of Buddhism, and you want to get into real depth, well, then you have to go with a book called In the Buddha's Words, In the Buddha's Words, an anthology of discourses from the Pali Canon, edited and introduced by Bhikkhu Bodhi. Bhikkhu Bodhi is a great modern translator and commentator on the earlier form of Buddhism. And not only does he include, major excerpts from the Pali Canon itself, the suttas so-called, but also he does an introduction in each of the chapters, and really gives you an in-depth sense of what that early form of Buddhism is about. Now, what can one say if one goes to Zen Buddhism? Of course, Zen Buddhism kind of shuns in some ways words and letters, but probably one of the most popular books, and there are a lot of them. Of course, you might want to look into the Diamond Sutra, the Sutra, which is the Sutra of the Sixth Patriarch, Huai Neng, and the Lankavatara Sutra. Those two scriptures really have been fundamental to the history of Chan Buddhism in China and then later Zen in Japan. But in terms of a modern writer, it's hard to beat Suzuki Roshi's book called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. And of course, Suzuki Roshi was the guy who really developed active Zen meditation activities in California, and was the founder of what now I believe is the San Francisco Zen Center, which has 2 or 3 locations out there on the West Coast, and is quite well regarded. It has spawned, I think, other Zen practice activities throughout the country, and has been a major contributor to that tradition within America. Here's his picture, by the way. I hope that comes out. He, of course, now has passed on, but this book contains informal talks on Zen meditation and practice, as well as, even though Zen folks don't like to talk about philosophical, he includes some profound philosophical ideas here. And again, it's a small book, only about 150 pages. Now, if a person wanted to get more into the Pure Land tradition, the first thing I might point to, rather than being the works of the founder Shinran himself, would be the Tani Show. And this BDK version, BDK English Tripitaka version, is called Tani Show, Passages Deploring Deviations of Faith. And so, yeah, that's what the Tani Show is. It's very well written, very easy to read by a disciple or follower of Shinran. He said he didn't have any disciples, but Wenbo, who wrote the Tani Show, was a follower of Shinran. And he wrote the Tani Show to help clarify deviations from the teaching. And what he did was, in effect, since he had heard Shinran with his own ears, he is recording in the Tani Show words that Shinran said to address various kinds of doctrinal issues. And of course, there are multiple translations of the Tani Show. It's one of the most beautiful and widely read of the Shin Buddhist or Jodo Shinshu kinds of texts. But this particular one by BDK also includes the letters of Renyo Shonin. Renyo was a couple of generations after Shinran, and he was really the one who helped propagate and spread the teaching widely of Shin Buddhism. If not for him, it might not have become as widely popular and pervasive as what it did in Japan, and then later in other countries as it spread beyond Japan. Now again, if you want to get deeper into that tradition, then you would have to get this, the Collected Works of Shinran. And this is volume 1 of the Collected Works of Shinran, which includes all of his writings. And there is a volume 2, as I've mentioned recently in another musing, that includes commentaries on this wonderful text um, that was that I believe was published by the Jodo Shinshu Hongwanji-ha, which is the Shin Buddhism headquarters in Japan. And I'll just end with one other that you could probably predict what I'd be ending with, which is, drum roll, the Lotus Sutra, of which, again, there are many translations. I like this one by BDK. And BDK is amazing. I mean, they have done translations of an amazing number of Buddhist texts. I really would strongly encourage it that you go to their website. I think it's called BDK America. And if you go to the texts, you'll see there's a link where you can see all these things. And for almost all of them, you can download it for free if you're so inclined and don't care to purchase the actual books. The books generally cost between $30 and $35. They're hardback, and they're done by various translators and are always of excellent quality. So anyhow, I'll stop there. I could go on and on and on, but I do encourage you to sort of explore Buddhism at a broad level, and then, follow those elements of it that are most appealing to you, keeping in mind that the reason there are so many elements is because the Buddha and Buddhism in general wants to implement this notion of expedient means or tactful methods such that each of us is different in our personality and our spiritual nature and our needs, etc. And so different aspects of Buddhism is going to be attractive to different ones of us. But whatever path you take, all the paths, if you want to think of it in terms of this metaphor, lead up to the same mountaintop, and that would be our aspiration to become Buddha. Some of us needing to wait until the next life. Others may be having the grit and the fortitude to trek that path in this lifetime, and I say more power to you. But in any case, I'll leave it at that for now and just say, Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu.